Back out by Jamie Baker. Yushkevich wheels it back in. Lindros lost. Archibald takes him out of the play. Up with it is Recchi. Walks in front. Shot one, knocked down. Rebound, score! Lindros!
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 236. Brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com. The Flyers have come out of the gate in the first 7 games, 1-5-1, which includes 1 victory, and that was in overtime. Well, in a shootout, and they don't have any regulation wins yet. They are a -14. They were just beaten back-to-back in a home-and-home versus the Washington Capitals. We're going to get into that. There's a lot of leaks being sprung with this team, and we got to talk about it. So let's bring in the panel. Always to my left, Chef B, you're smiling and happy. I guess you have money down against the Flyers, maybe. You want a couple bets?
No. I did place my bets, though. I think I shared them on Twitter if you want to take a peek at that.
Yes,
but it was fun. It is what it is. I didn't expect to see anything out of this team right now, but I'm sure we'll get into everything. I don't want to talk about the show before we do the show. So I'm just happy hockey's back. I'm getting to watch games all across the league. I'm happy. So that's all I'll say for now.
And of course, we have the great Dan Silver checking in. How are you?
I'm good. I was at the game last night. I got to see Michkov. His first time I've seen him score a goal live, so that was exciting. And I don't know. We'll get into it. I don't know what to make of this team. My predictions are always wrong. I think they're going to be good and they're bad. I think they're going to be bad and they're mediocre. So who knows? Who knows what's going on? But it's always fun to go watch them live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, live hockey is great. I think hockey is the best live team sport, but we got a lot to get into tonight. Before we do just that, just a reminder that Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, provides you with 40 years of the finest Philly cheesesteaks in the grandest tradition. Cheesesteaks, fries, hoagies, you name it, down on 400 South Street. So if you're down there, check them out. You won't regret it. Tell them Isaiah, Dan, and Chef sent you, or Flyers Nitty Gritty sent you down. And certainly if you live down there, use Uber Eats, DoorDash, whatever it takes to get that delicious food right to your door. So check out Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. Okay, let's get into this. I tweeted out on when I was in control of the O&B Puckcast account on X at O&B Puck. you can follow us there. Last season, the goaltending, a solid D, igniting a transition game, and some breakout performances made the Flyers really the surprise team of the NHL. Then Hart and Walker were gone. Sealer was injured. Coots declined, and it all fell apart. This season, it really is yet to be put back together again. So the special teams are better in that the power play is better, but the 5-on-5 play is now replacing the power play problem from last year. Everything else is kind of static. And this is a team that is certainly not recovered from last year. And last year, I thought I put it, Dan, I'm going to start with you. I kind of put it a little on the coach, the way he dealt with Sean Couturier, who, oh, by the way, finally had a good game last night. But I think we're going to have to start taking a look at the big picture as we get to the 10 and 15 game mark.
Yeah, the coaching, it's been interesting this year, to say the least. I mean, John Tortorella has scrambled the lines so much that it's got to be hard for these guys to get any kind of chemistry going with anybody. It just seems like he's all over the place, neurotic, erratic. I don't know. I don't know what to make of what Torts is kind of doing this year, trying to do this year. They were excited about Jett Luchanko. Then he scratched the last 2 games. He's probably going back. I'm sure we'll probably get into that later. I don't know what he's really doing. It seems like he's getting a lot of input from different people. They talked about the input on the power play, and it's just it's kind of like a weird vibe going on right now with Torts and the organization. And I don't know. And then the big picture, I mean, in stretches, this team has played okay, but I think that the Walker Sealer pair was so good for this team last year that I wonder how much the lack of that kind of stability that they brought is hurting this team from a 5-on-5 basis, right? They really relied on those 2 guys on the back end as that pair that was sort of there the first half of the year. And it's I don't know. It was good to see Couturier finally have a good game. I do think that so far he's in that game last night when he was with Michkov. That was sort of the best pairing for the Flyers with Michkov so far this season. But there's just a lot of disappointing things and a lot of players that are making money now that I'm questioning. I was sitting there watching the game last night. I was at the game and I'm like, which of the contracts that the Flyers gave out, which of these guys are actually worth the money that they're making? And I'm not just talking about guys like Sean Couturier, and Ristolainen, guys who are clearly overpaid, but guys like, Konechny and Tippett, and are these guys really worth what we're paying them, or we just have a bunch of guys that we're overpaying and it's just going to come back to haunt us at some point? So it's never fun when a team's losing like this. I don't think they're this bad as their record illustrates, but it doesn't look great.
No, it does not. And Chef, there's a lot that reflects on the type of offseason that Danny Briere had. A lot of people felt like, well, Danny's hands were tied with the salary and things like that. And, my opinion going into it is, okay, we'll just pick off a little more young talent, even if it doesn't make the roster, even if we have to wait another year or they need another year in the AHL or whatever it is, and just accumulate more players we can look forward to. But maybe even that is not enough. What's your opinion?
I think the fact that they almost made it last year, they say it didn't play into their schedule to change their mind, but I think it did a little. I think that they flirted with it in the off season, doing what they could do. But I think that was more of an excuse just to play it safe rather than take a chance and have that blow up in their face, whether it be younger players, whatever. I will say this, though. I was in between both of you in the Jett Luchanko thing. And I'm leaning more now after watching these first 6 games because I missed it yesterday. I had a fundraiser to go to, so I couldn't watch it, and I taped the wrong station, of course. But So the first 6 games, what I'm looking at after seeing that, when especially with Luchanko not being in the lineup, they're a lot slower, and I think there's something to be said for what Dan said too. And at this point now, yeah, if you do send him down, does it hurt him? I don't know if it does. I think he's mentally tough, but at this point, it doesn't. I feel like he's sat. He's done this, so you should just let him play the maximum games now, and then send him down with the thought that, hey, you're going to get more. You're going to get better playing time, more playing time down there. But I don't think at this point it's going to make a difference to him. But at this point, I mean, they were too slow without him. The lines aren't steady, so I can't even figure out who the hell I'm watching anymore. And just when you think a play is going to develop, it breaks down because, surprise, they've only played one preseason game together, the lines at the beginning of the season, and now they're even more scrambled. So I just think it's got to settle down. Something's got to settle down. At least let it sit. And Delorier, I don't know why he sees the lineup. Not yet, anyway. But that's it's a whole nother argument.
Yeah, I think Kevin Kurz put something out there that Tortorella had come up with at least 18 different line combinations, just scrambling. And to me, it speaks to someone who really doesn't have any answers. He didn't have any answers last year. He doesn't seem to have any answers this year. And I'm not one of those guys who focuses so much on the coach because he's done such a good job with the culture and all that. But I'm just wondering, have the Flyers maxed out in this way where you're going to have to start getting more logic-based answers or approaches to how you're dealing with fundamental issues. And when, Chef, you say they look slower, I think a lot of that, I think Bill Meltzer mentioned this, it may be foot speed, but I think it's a lot of guys taking that extra second to think about where they should be and the lack of cohesion because they don't know who they're with half the game. And then it's, he likes to be over a little bit. He cheats over here at this player. And it's a lack of cohesion in general. But, you brought up Luchanko. And Dan, I'm going to go to you. Darren Drager does a podcast with Ray Ferraro, and they were talking about Jett. And I was thinking, well, he sat out, Tortorella sits out Luchanko 2 games in a row versus a really physical team. I'm thinking maybe that's why he did it. And maybe Luchanko's banged up in it and didn't want to tell us. But either way, Drager thinks he's just a little green in his eyes, but loves his speed, and he surprised a lot of people. But it seems inevitable in his mind, for his speculation, that Luchanko will be sent back. I say that's informed speculation. I don't think he just spit that out there, but maybe I'm wrong. What say you?
Look, it sure seems like it's trending towards them sending him down. I mean, he just was a healthy scratch for 2 straight games, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it certainly seems to me like he's sending him down. And this has sort of been Briere and Jones versus Torts, right? Torts has been the guy that has been all along sort of raving about Luchanko's speed and all the things he does. And people were setting it up as sort of like this is going to be knocking heads between Briere and Torts. And based on what we've heard, and I think even Chris Therien had mentioned somewhere that, those guys, like Crossing Broad guys, had a podcast, Snow the Goalie, with all the Flyers.
Briere and Jones, yeah.
Yeah, with Briere and Jones and Dan Hilferty.
And Hilferty, right.
Chris Therien said that, he was either before the interview or after the interview, just from him talking to Briere, he really got the sense that, he was going to be sent down, right? Eventually.
Yeah, can I interject something? I think they were going to the elevator or something like that, and they were just talking casually, and Bundy said that Briere mentioned to him that he's more worried about Jett in 5 years than in 5 games, something like that.
Right, exactly. So between that and the Drager stuff and the fact that he's been scratched for a few games in a row, it just seems to me that it's just a matter of time before Luchanko goes down, which is fine. I mean, I thought they might want to keep him around because of, as Chef said, what he brings to the lineup. But clearly at this point, I mean, he has no points in any of the games he played. He could use going back down, playing with Guelph. Hopefully Corey Stillman, who's the new coach there, is better than the coaching that they had last year. And hopefully he'll make the, Canadian World Junior team, have a chance to play there. So I think it seems inevitable that he'll be going back down. But what's interesting with the constant line shuffling, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I mentioned in my little preamble about the power play, and they've talked all summer about how they've got like a power play committee where Tortorella, Briere, John Leclerc, Patrick Sharp, Rocky Thompson, these guys are meeting like once a month to go over
Danny
the power
Heatley.
play. And Danny Heatley, and get input about it. And Tortorella kept talking about how, these guys keep saying that, I've got to keep together these units to really, let them have a chance to meld. So part of me is thinking Tortorella can't change around the power play units. So maybe he's overcompensating by changing around the line so much, because obviously he's an NHL coach. He's probably a control freak. He's probably not happy that he's under direction not to change around the power play unit. So maybe that has something to do with why he's changing around the regular line so much. But they need to, and by the way, Cam York got drilled last night at the end of the game. It was right in front of where I was sitting.
Yeah.
And he went in really awkwardly to the boards. I don't know if he injured his shoulder or his head, but it did not look great. He went right to the dressing room. I mean, I was watching him. I don't know if the camera was following him, but it was right in front of me. He looked woozy. He was holding his shoulder. He went off. He went into the locker room, and there have been no updates on him. I'm kind of worried that Cam York might have gotten some kind of serious injury there. Who knows? Maybe he didn't, but it didn't look great. So I kind of want to see what happens there. But what I was going to say is we've been saying the past year, Egor Zamula should not be on the power play. He is so slow, and it leads to shorthanded chances against. And they gave up 2 shorthanded goals yesterday that were, or 2 days ago, that were the game in Philly, that were both when Zamula was out there. I mean, they need to get him off the power play. If it's Sanheim, if it's York. But it is funny that Torts is not allowed to change the power play units, at least from what he said, because of this committee they've got. And maybe that's why he's overcompensating with changing around all these other lines. Another interesting thing is, he made a big deal about how when they have Konechny and Michkov on the same line early on in the preseason or the season, and Torts was saying, well, Michkov's got to play the left because, Konechny has to be on the right. Now, all of a sudden, last night they put Konechny on the left with Couturier and Michkov on the right. So the guy was saying that Konechny had to play the right. Now he's on the left. It just seems like he doesn't have a grasp of what's going on.
He doesn't have any answer. And you know what, though? I'll give him credit for this much. That was the best performing line in terms of shots for and against. And I think high danger chances, although that last stat I'm not really sure about, but it was one of the better lines they had all night. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. The Flyers taking Luchanko out, a kid is, what is he, 6 weeks past his 18th birthday? And when you have guys like Riley Armstrong, who's the head of player, development, and Brett Flair is there talking about the same thing pretty much, that we want Jett to work on his offense, to be more creative, to work on his shot. They see obvious needs in his game. Let him just go and take care of that. And this might be a cluster F of a year. But I totally agree with Zamula as an NFW on a power play. I mean, just stop already. It's really funny how Zamula has this almost exalted status because he's the liaison and / translator for Michkov. But I think under normal circumstances, we'd have Emil Andre up here playing along with Ristolainen, because Andre clearly would be a greater asset, at least on the power play. And frankly, he has better hockey sense. Chef.
I wanted to point out, and thank God you brought it up. Zamula has actually been horrible, and I just think, what was the point of bringing Andre on that road trip, and just to sit, and then he doesn't even get a look before he's sent down. when you're having this atrocious play from your defense. I think Ristolainen's been subpar. I think all the defense has been subpar. I think, your goalies are taking way too many shots too early, high danger shots too early too, to where they're put in positions. I know that Fedotov has got to get better. Urson has bounced. He's been pretty good, but it's just they're just letting off too many high danger chances and early in games too, and they're going to be back in the same position they were last year, chasing games. Now it looks like they're not going to score as much as they did last year, and these games they're not going to be as tight in defense because the goalie, the slotting of the goalies isn't what it was last year, and you're seeing that evident. The defense isn't what it was last year, and you're having trouble scoring early on. So, until they figure out the scoring, I think I think that they're going to end up, like I said, somewhere in trouble, and maybe 8 to 10 points out of a playoff spot, instead of being closer than last year.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's like the swoon from last year never really ended. Dan?
I'm not sure they're going to score less than last year. I mean, the power play looks a lot better, like much better. And guys as much as Owen Tippett drives me crazy, he's a very streaky scorer. He had that one goal yesterday that was just kind of like a weird bouncy puck he threw towards the net and it beat the goalie.
Seeing eye kind of thing.
He's going to start scoring some goals. Like Tyson Forster will score a little bit. I think these guys will end up scoring goals, but I just worry about the defense and how many goals they're going to give up. I mean, this team is kind of a defensive mess right now. So I think they're going to probably lose a lot of high scoring games is what I'm thinking. And Fedotov is just, again, I was at the game, I was sitting somewhat down low. So it's from that vantage point, it's hard to necessarily judge everything, especially down at the other end. But Fedotov, for my eyes, was giving up some really bad goals last night. The breakaway obviously was whatever, but he just doesn't really look like he just doesn't look like an NHL goalie to me. Kolosov hasn't exactly been great in Lehigh Valley, but I'm guessing they may give him a shot before the month is out. And Urson, I think Urson's above average, but I don't think he's great. I don't know if he's ever going to be great. So the goaltending is going to be a bit of an issue also.
Until Zabragin gets here, right? So
we have 4 more years until Zabragin gets
it's only 4 more years. Yeah, why you have to be mad? Now let's talk about let's talk about Fedotov, Kolosov just a little bit. Fedotov is, I think maybe he salvaged another opportunity, Chef, with his play after 4 goals. And one that was definitely bad, maybe another he should have stopped. Okay. This is how desperate it was. Let's put it this way. If Kolosov was really knocking him dead and not looking like a guy who needs more experience like he does, then he'd probably be here now. But I think that's where it's at. I think Fedotov will at least get one of these games coming up on the weekend. And this Saturday and Sunday, they play Minnesota and Montreal at home. And I think Fedotov is going to get one of those probably. And we'll see if that doesn't work out. It wouldn't surprise me, like Dan said, if Kolosov gets called up regardless of what happens. What say you?
It's a tough call. If he shows if he does get a chance this weekend, which if he does, which thing I think it's going to be the Canadiens game, right? That would be my guess. He gets the Canadiens. I think it's just a better for him. But if he shows a better showing than this week, let's say he only lets in one bad goal and they keeps it around 3. It's improvement. And do you really want to mess with Kolosov right now? No. I don't think you do, because like Dan said too, I haven't seen enough. I've only seen highlights, so I haven't even watched any of those games yet. So I just don't see it. I don't see them going to Kolosov before 20 games. Let's just say that, because you gotta let him. What's this 7th game that Fedotov has played in the NHL? 7 games. I know the angles are different. I know the rinks are different. I know the KHL too has some NHL size rinks too, but also,
Yeah.
there is an adjustment period in North American hockey. I'll give you that. But I just think that 7 games is a little early to start yoinking stuff and going to another person who's in the same position.
Well, a lot of it has to do with the Kolosov ticking clock, supposedly, which is unofficial, but seems to be official. I think that's part of it too. So, I mean, I think your point is actually better well taken. I would respect the patient approach for both players, but we have this dynamic that is real because you have the top guys like Friedman and has been talking about
well, to your point, either way, what did you think you were going to get to? Well, you think that we're making a run for the cup this year? Then no. Then if there is a plan, if the Briere and Jones have a plan, and you stick to it. You keep them where they're at for now, and you don't make a decision until you get to 20-25 games to see what you give them a little bit of time to adjust. Because it doesn't affect anything. I thought they were going to get a better draft pick than they did last year at the end of the season this year. So it doesn't really. I don't see them making the playoffs. Anybody thought they were a playoff team this year? I think they're sadly mistaken. So in my mind, it doesn't change your positioning or your game plan at this point.
Okay. I thought you were going to say delusional. Well, go ahead.
But the point I think that Isaiah was trying to make was that, there's people who are speculating, Elliot Friedman, that when the Flyers got Kolosov to come over, the part of the agreement was that if, he could decide to go back to Russia by the end of October, potentially. Yeah. So if the choice is that you either give Kolosov a look here in the NHL, before the end of this month or early next month, or he's going to get to go back to Russia and you're not going to get to see how he looks in the NHL, well, then how does that impact your decision?
Drew?
Yeah. Yeah. Dan's got a point there. And I think we're just waiting to see what happens. We'll find out Halloween. The mask will be removed. And the masks are coming up.
Maybe he'll play that game on Halloween.
Yeah. And it'll be frightening. But maybe not. Trick or treat. We'll find out.
Congratulations, you drew the Bruins.
Here's right, exactly. Well,
no,
is that who it is?
Blues, but
no,
well, the Boston is on the 29th, and St. Louis. It would probably be St. Louis at home, I would think.
They've got 2 Boston games, the 29th and the 2nd. I'll be up there for that game on the 2nd.
So, okay, here's an elephant in the room. The Flyers need centers. They got too many wingers, too many right wingers. The one true top six left winger they have, what did he get? Like less than 9 minutes last night. Farabee's in a real funk, and he's one of the players going forward that just hasn't really, I guess you would say he's regressed since AB left. And he's had kind of like this ongoing feud since Torts got here. A lot of it was due to his neck injury and the recovery. But last year he kind of fell off at the end of the year, or no, he improved. I can't keep track of all these guys. They're so streaky. They need a center. At some point, they're going to have to let go of get this situation, whether it's the guys who should be on the left side, the right side, and just the number of wingers they have relative to what they need at center. Like, how can you straighten this roster out? Because if Luchanko's not going to be here, and I don't think he should, everybody knows that as a regular listener. And now Couturier is like a 2.5 C at best. Well, what gives? Because Morgan Frost is, like the toilet seat still.
Well, I think you need stability before anything. I think Dan was right. These lines are mixed up. Like, you got to I think they got to all go back to basics. Go back to what worked for you in the past, whether it be who did you say was the best center with Michkov for now? Was it Coots?
I mean, Couturier looked good with the last night.
Okay, so you work from there. Then who's the winger? You need somebody dependable to be on the other side.
Well, they had Konechny on that line last night.
I missed it.
You had Konechny on the left wing.
I think that's bad. I think you can't be on the same line for right now. I don't think so.
Well, they look good though.
What, they look good with Konechny?
Yeah, they had a 70%. They had a 70% Corsi for or something like that.
Well, that's on me for missing the game, but I just think you need stability. Stability is the next thing. Pick 3 guys and at least leave it the same for 2 games and just see what they can do. Whether it be TK, Coots, and Mitch, and then whatever you're going to do with your other lines. I think it's a disservice to all the other players if you're just going to have them like. But I thought I saw like Delorier on the line with Michkov, like in the highlights, or is that just bad changing and they got caught? So I mean, that's just, to me, that's ridiculous.
Well,
They
yeah,
were
that
not on the line
wasn't.
together.
Yeah, that might have been incidental, in, like after a penalty or
Maybe.
something. I don't recall that myself, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, Isaiah, Morgan Frost has been disappointing to me so far this year. I thought he was better at times last year than we've seen from him so far. I mean, he's a guy who this is his time to shine in terms of like snagging a spot as one of the Flyers' top centers. And I just don't think he's been all that assertive, all that good. One of these things, maybe just a leopard just, doesn't change its spots. I mean, I keep wanting more from him, and I don't know if we're going to get there. I feel the same way about Owen Tippett. I mean, he's a frustrating guy to watch play, which brings me back to my original point. Like, a lot of these guys, they even when they committed to Owen Tippett last year, I had serious reservations about it. A lot of them were because I kind of prefer Farabee, and Farabee's been struggling too. So, bottom line, like maybe they just don't have enough talent. I mean, I think that if you've
It's
got
the mix.
It's the mix, you think?
Yeah, they need centers.
If you have a center, I think everybody slots a little bit better, but I still think you're short on talent.
Makes more sense.
Still short on talent.
Oh, I agree with that, but it like I've seen teams that are capable of getting zone time. I mean, everything starts with getting out of your own end. I mean, if you want to get back to fundamentals and the basics, and Drysdale's playing a little bit better. You still see the mistakes. I give him a 6-month mulligan, like a 60-game mulligan, frankly, because of how the coaching, his injuries, the fact that he came in during the pandemic. You got to give this guy a chance with that kind of skating speed and the pedigree of being 6 overall and 21. I mean, you got to give him a chance. So I think that's the biggest problem. If Ryan Paling is anything but a 4th line center on a team, the team is just has no centers. And Couturier obviously is in decline. Noah Cates is like a 4th line center, probably a 3rd line winger. Noah Cates is like the new Lawton. Is it time to let go of Scott Lawton? Lawton's actually playing pretty well right now. But if Lawton could get you something in combination with one of their picks, and they could get like a Band-Aid center that they could like have on this team for about 3 or 4 years, just to give them some transition time.
I think you could, but I think it's still early. It's too early to still too early to get it. But yes,
I hear you.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm looking more and more like the fact that you're going to have to make that move. You're going to have to pull the string on that this year. I hate to say it. I mean, he's been a great for the locker room, great for the team, but it's looking more and more that you need to get. You can't keep passing up a number 1 pick or combinations or a good 2nd-round pick for an aging player that doesn't fit your long-term plans, right?
I don't know what we're going to get for Scott Lawton. I have this feeling that like Scott Lawton might just find a way to retire a Flyer. Like, they love. I mean, he brings so much to the locker room. He's kind of instilled himself in the community. I sort of feel like if they were going to trade Scott Lawton, it would have happened already. Like, I think his value was a lot higher last year, maybe the year before. And now I just think maybe there's other guys that they might look to move before they trade Lawton. Him and Konechny are really good shorthanded. I mean, it's laughable, but a lot of times the Flyers' best chances in a game come when they're shorthanded and Lawton and Konechny are out there together. I have this feeling that Lawton is going to end up finishing his career as a Flyer, or at least spending a number more years here, because I don't think they can get a 1st-round pick anymore for Scott Lawton. I don't even know if they can get a 2nd-round pick. And when you look at it through that lens, like if you could get the same for a Noah Cates or something, I think they'd rather trade a guy like that. Like I think it's value dependent, and I just don't see them getting a first for Lawton anymore. And he feels to me like a guy who might end up spending a lot of his remaining career in the orange and black.
He'll remain a Flyer even if it's a tire fire, right?
He loves Philadelphia, you know.
He's got a file.
And
He's got a file on somebody in a
he just had congratulations to Scott Lawton. Him and his wife just had a newborn, I believe.
Oh yes, congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Lawton. I'm not trying to diminish that or say I don't appreciate it. Certainly, congrats. I really do mean that. The team's in trouble.
Do you think they're going to trade Lawton, Isaiah?
Toward the end, toward the trade deadline, is certainly a possibility if they have a very disappointing season. Yes, I do think it's possible.
What do you think is
now? Yeah, I don't know. It depends. If he's playing well, Dan, I think he can certainly rebuild his value. Don't forget, also playing into it is his salary. He's very reasonable. So, and I don't have Puckpedia in front of me. How much term he's got left, and I will get Puckpedia right in front of me. So, yeah, that's part of it. That's one of the allures of Lawton, is that he's making a reasonable amount of coin, and he's a character guy. Okay, so he's making $3 million for he signed through the end of next year. So so that's a very desirable player. You have them for the extra year, and he's a culture guy, and at that point, he's probably not going to demand a lot. So he would slot in like a team like Colorado, doesn't have a lot of cap space, needs depth. He would fit perfectly because he skates quickly. He doesn't have the highest hockey IQ, and that's why he's a third or fourth line player. But he would fit perfectly with the Avalanche.
To Dan's point, though, you're thinking that maybe Noah Cates would be a better. He's an RFA after the season, but he's $2.625 million. So I just think that RFA status might hurt him. Well, unless they're just looking for a rental. So I think there's no value there.
Yeah, I don't think so. RFA is not like
there's no value there, though. Even if he scores 10, 15 goals, I don't think there's any value there with Noah Cates.
Well, I disagree. I think I think it's dependent upon his production. The attraction to that player is that he plays like a coach's son. The coaches tend to like him because they trust him on the ice. They want more production out of him. If he does provide that, then it becomes much more attractive because you're getting a lot of the two-way stuff with that player. So I don't know if I agree with that. But Cates, if Cates can't stay in this lineup consistently, you can make the case he's just not that good, period. But so if we sound like we're grasping at straws, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are, and that maybe Daniel Briere needed to do a little bit more shaking up of this roster, and that last year was a little bit of fool's gold. They thought they had built the culture to a point. You bring Michkov in here. Let's not go crazy. Let's work out some of our salary issues, and let's get through this year. Let's find out what we have in Fedotov and Kolosov, and and get a lot of answers to questions, at least to midway through the season. If they start the season with a 10-game winning streak or a 10-game losing streak, that building is going to be empty.
I think people are still going to come to watch Michkov. He is an exciting player to watch. I think they wanted to do things this summer. I think that they went into the summer thinking that they were going to do things like trade Joel Farabee and get a good center in return. And I just don't think the market was there. I don't think it materialized. I don't think they were maybe willing to give up what they were going to have to give up to get guys like a Zegras or a Marty Nachos, who I don't think they were even convinced were actually centers. I just don't think I think they wanted to make moves, but I'm not sure the moves are out there. So they really are in this position where, we've got all these media appearances with Hilferty and Keith Jones and Danny Briere talking about what they're building and the culture they're building, and it's a big happy family. But if they're not winning and they clearly don't have the talent, it's like, how are you going to get there? How are you going to get to this destination? And it was interesting. I think in one of the press conferences early on or before the season, someone asked like, well, how are you going to build this cup contender without adding more guys like Michkov? It doesn't seem like you're going to get an early pick. And Briere, the team that he brought up as an example, was the St. Louis Blues.
Yep.
But the problem with that is that these guys keep talking about how they want to build a team that can contend for the cup every year. Well, the Blues are a terrible example because the Blues made the cup and won the cup the one season. And it was clearly sort of like just everything came together for one season. They weren't that great of a team in terms of how they were built, and they fell off immediately after that one season. And so it was just kind of weird that he brought them up as the team to talk about. But that is the reality, is like, we're not going to be adding all this Supremo talent like the Lightning had for their dynasty and like Colorado has, and so it's like, how are you going to get to their path of what they want to get to, a perennial cup contender? I don't know.
Yeah, you can only play Gloria by Laura Branigan so many times. So that kind of ran out. So let's get some good news. Matvei Michkov has 7 points in 7 games, and an official stat here from NHL.com. Matvei becomes the 4th teenage rookie in Flyers history with at least 7 points through his first 7 NHL games, after Eric Lindros, Peter Zezel, and Rich Sutter.
A good company.
So,
and no Flyer has ever won the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year, and that would be a very, like, look, even if this team is clearly not going to make the playoffs and we're 3/4 of the way through the season, as long as Michkov is in the hunt for the Calder Trophy, I think people are going to be excited about that, and people will go watch. And clearly he's electrified the power play. I mean, that goal he scored last night was fantastic. I mean, he got the puck on the right wall. He sort of, walked himself into a scoring position at the, top of the shooting lane, close to the point. And he waited till Couturier was in the perfect spot where he was screening the goalie, and he put a perfectly placed shot on net. Like, he just knows how to score. He knows how to make good offensive decisions. So
yeah, that was a thinking man's goal. And in fact, Coots had played a role in 2 of the goals last night with his screens, and didn't get any points, but we recognize. Yeah, I was right about that line with TK and Matvei with Couturier. They were also 70% with expected goals for. So they were only together for 3 minutes, but it was one of the more effective units last night. So, backtracking a little bit, since we last spoke to you, the Flyers lost a frustrating game in Calgary. Fedotov was brutal. Another game, at least they got a point versus Edmonton, but Edmonton they were due. I was less disappointed in that, more disappointed in the loss to Seattle. They were chasing that game all night, brief comeback, lost 6-4. And then they lost to the Canucks, who they had defeated in Vancouver on opening night on a shootout, but they were never in that game. The Canucks just checked the heck out of the Flyers. It's a 3-0 shutout. They had their chances, but it's just never a sense that the Flyers were in that game. And Canucks have playoff pedigree, and they're a dark horse cup contender. And then, of course, so we're thinking they all had 1 day off, Chef, coming back from the West Coast trip, and they have this back-to-back versus Washington, which brings us to where we're at now. But we didn't have any excuses versus the Caps. The Caps deserved to win that game, and the Flyers were just flat.
They're flat. All right, 2 time zones, 1 day off. All right, whatever. All right, but at some point, you're a hockey player. It's got to kick in, right? So is it an excuse? Yes. It's not an excuse, though, at the same time. It's one of those Schrodinger cat thingies, But they definitely they need to show more fire some more life in the beginning of games. I think if they can get out to a good start in a game, like they did, I guess in Vancouver, right? They were up 2-0 in the first in the opening night, and they were able to control the tempo of the game, even though it got tied and it came back a couple, late goals by Vancouver, but you were able to control. But it's so much easier to play ahead than to chase a game. And I think that's where they need to be. They're not going to be that team that's going to be able to come back late in games. So if they don't control the first 10 minutes of a game, then they're going to have problems the whole damn season.
Yeah, you know what really bothers me and is a sign of a losers lose kind of situation and loser mentality? It's like when they get scored on, it's like another minute later, they get scored on again. Or if they finally get a goal, and we saw this in versus the Caps, right? Then the Caps come back like the next minute and get, and take back that momentum. And it's just killer. And this is what losing teams tend to do. And a lot of this is happening 5-on-5. And it's just crushing them right now. And it speaks to all the problems we've been talking about most of tonight, Dan.
Yeah, it was, I was at the home opener and then I was at the game last night, and the home opener was depressing, but it was not unexpected because you're the whole day before you're flying back. And I sort of expected that maybe they'd be a little jet lagged. But the thing that disappointed me was that there was no pushback. They weren't getting physically involved. I mean, it's the home opener. It's Matvei Michkov's first game at home. Even if you're kind of fighting through some jet lag, show a little bit of grit, show a little bit of fight. I don't remember a single big check in the game. All right, then you get to rest for a few nights. And now you should be back, just like you said, Isaiah, you're kind of like back. You should be in a good mental state. You're at home against the Caps, who are not a great team. And you come out and you give up those shorthanded goals. You don't really play all that well. And then last night, you just put yourself in a 4-0 hole. I mean, it's just like again, I don't know how much of this kind of goes back to Tortorella, and they're just not prepared, or I'm not sure. I think that I'm hoping that they can carry over what happened in the last half of the game last night. By the way, Michkov scores that goal, cuts it to a 4-3 deficit. They had all the momentum. I thought that John Tortorella took the goalie out way early in that game last night. The Flyers had the momentum. He takes the goalie out, and then they have that bad line change. I don't know what Zamulo's doing, and the Caps score that empty netter. I actually thought it was another penalty. I thought there was another penalty coming up because I'm like, why is Fedotov out of the net with whatever was 4 minutes left? It's a 1-goal game. I mean, that was a boneheaded move by Tortorella. So it seems like things are a little bit out of whack. I know we've got the Wild on Saturday. I hope they can start scoring some goals, stringing some wins together. But yeah, I mean, again, Drysdale, I think, has been playing a little better. So him and Michkov are kind of two of the guys that have sort of been shining lights a little bit. And I think it would be a good story if Couturier could kind of turn things around from this early season doldrums and the questions about, he's on the fourth line left wing for the home opener. I mean, talk about a shot that was across the bow. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Tortorella just, it's really funny. I was going back and forth with somebody who's a national pundit, and he was talking about Luchanko, and he said if they don't send him back, Tortorella's going to turn him into a third line center. John doesn't care. So I'm thinking, he gets in his ways, and I'm thinking maybe some of those ways, start again. I'm gonna harp on this theme. Maybe some of those ways started wearing off last year. The way he panicked and the way he took it out, everything on Couturier, it just, there was no upside to that. Nothing. He got nothing out of that. It was all negative. And it's like since then, kind of like I agree with a lot of things he said, conclusions he's come come to early on in the training camp and all that. But still, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking he kind of lost it last year, and I'm thinking maybe he lost them.
Quite
Jeff?
possibly. You never know. But like I said, you'll know within next 15 or so games. You'll know where their heads are at, because if they're not playing for them, it'll be very obvious. We see that when that happens to teams. And he's a lame duck coach anyway right now, so who knows? But what do you do? I mean, that's a conversation for later down the road. But you have to keep it in your mind right now. But you'll know if he lost the room, we'll know soon enough within 10 games.
Yeah, I mean, it is early to come to a lot of, quote, conclusions about the team. I've seen a lot of teams recover but you can't bury yourself early in the year in terms of any kind of playoff chances. I didn't think they were going to make it, so that's not what upsets me. What upsets me is the lack of competitiveness, the lack of 5-on-5 cohesion, and just some decisions. Fedotov, to me, looked like a guy who needs AHL time. He needs to be rebuilt. Kolosov needs more AHL time because he just doesn't have the experience. And Emil Andre should be here, and Zamula should have been put on waivers to make room for him. Or maybe they didn't need Erik Johnson after all. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I just hope it gets better.
Well, I wouldn't bank on it getting better sooner than later.
I think, unless there's something I forgot, that's more or less what we had to impart to you tonight. And I think we're at that point where we want to tell you that we're going to be back next Wednesday. The Flyers play this weekend set at home, first against the Wild. Well, that's a good team. That's a guy they could have drafted. He's becoming a real stud power forward. What's it, Matthew Boldy?
Yeah.
He's a hell of a player. And the Montreal Canadiens on Sunday, the 27th. Boston, they're at the Bruins on the 29th, and they're back home to face St. Louis. And, well, that's after we see you on the 30th, Wednesday. We have a show. So you got 3 more games before we come back at you. Chef, you want to give us some final thoughts or anything that maybe you want to talk about?
I'll tell you what. For right now, I'm staying the course. I'm believing what I thought I'm going to believe. I'm going to believe what I thought this team is going to be. I'm going to hang in there with that. I think when you get to around game 25-ish, there'll be like 2 games under 500. I think that's what this team is. I think that's what they'll be for the rest of the season. They'll win a couple games here and there. They'll beat teams that they're supposed to beat. I think they'll be 8 points around out of a playoff spot, even if they have more points than they did last year. I think just everybody else got better and leapfrogged them around them. Did they get a little bit better? With Michkov on the team, you have to say yes. So, but hey, guess what? I made some bets. Michkov rookie for the Calder. I made what was the other one? Flyers to make the playoffs, just because I don't like to bet against my team. It's bad voodoo. And
Sure.
I think Dallas wins the cup. And I think I got at least 2 winners there. So we'll see. And if you want to argue with me about that, then by all means, tweet at me at Chef Gillespie on Twitter.
You got it. The great Dan Silver, what are your final thoughts for tonight?
Well, there's going to be some drama. I mean, I think that the Kolosov situation, I think that there's going to be some, if it's true that they've got to figure it out by the end of this month, they don't have a whole lot of time. So that's going to be something to keep an eye out on. I want to see what we hear about Cam York's injury status, and maybe by the time people are listening to this, we'll have more information, but I'm a little worried about that. And if he's injured, things could get ugly fast, because I think he's been our most reliable defenseman this season. But it's, I think it really is going to be sort of about Michkov and watching him grow, and hopefully that Couturier line with him and Konechny can stick together for more than a period. I don't know. It's we'll see what happens, but just kind of going to be trying to watch the little things with seeing the power play continue to improve. And that's about it for me.
Yeah. And people can catch it on X.
At dsilver88, the 88 for Eric Lindros.
You got it. Boy, do we miss those days, right? Hey, just a reminder that you can catch the O&B Puckcast on X at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck, on Getter at O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puckcast. And of course, we're on a dozen or so podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, TuneIn, Deezer, you name it. We also have a YouTube page, Facebook page. If you're on YouTube, just plug in there O&B Puckcast. We should come right up. And please subscribe, follow on your platform of choice, because it helps move us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcast. And with that, everybody, until our next show, thanks for listening tonight and take care.